This hour, we'll discuss today's top stories, including the state of Texas asking public colleges and universities to identify which of their students are living in the country illegally so they can start paying out-of-state tuition. I'm Frank Billingsley.
And I'm Celestia Sherman. We'll also talk with the University of Houston's Dr. Asher Lubotzky about Israeli politics, Middle Eastern affairs, international relations, and more.
Plus, we'll also hear Ernie Manouse's conversation with actress Sara Tomko, best known for playing Asta 12 Trees in the sci-fi comedy series Resident Alien.
And as Frank and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, your questions, and your concerns. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. From the NATO summit at The Hague, President Trump further dismissed a preliminary U.S. intelligence damage assessment of American strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. The president is still describing the impact as obliteration. As NPR's Tamara Keith reports, Trump is downplaying the risk of Iran restarting its nuclear program.
President Trump said the U.S. would meet with Iranian officials next week, but he no longer sees urgency in pursuing an agreement with Iran to halt its nuclear ambitions.
We may sign an agreement, I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought, now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. The only thing we'd be asking for is what we were asking for before about we want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear.
A preliminary U.S. intelligence assessment found damage from the strikes may be less severe than Trump has described, but the president said it's too soon to have the full picture. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
NATO leaders agreed to a new defense spending target of 5% of gross domestic product. The alliance says the increase is needed due to the threat posed by Russia. Zohran Mamdani is on the cusp of winning New York City's Democratic mayoral primary. As David Brand with member station WNYC reports, the Democratic Socialist is claiming victory.
New York City's ranked choice voting system means the winner has to get a majority. But it's looking good for Mamdani. His main rival, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, already conceded defeat. The city's Board of Elections will begin ranked choice tabulations on July 1st. Mamdani is a Democratic socialist and could become the first Muslim mayor of New York. But victory isn't guaranteed. Current Mayor Eric Adams is running as an independent, and Cuomo says he may run on a third-party line too. For NPR News, I'm David Brand in New York.
It's another hot day in much of the central and eastern U.S. The National Weather Service has issued heat advisories and extreme heat warnings in about 24 states, from Louisiana to New Hampshire. NPR's Rebecca Hersher says the heat dome means dangerous conditions for those who work outside.
Outdoor jobs can be dangerous in hot weather, for example, picking food, doing construction, or delivering mail. Ryan Paparello works for the Laborers' Health and Safety Fund of North America, a union-affiliated group that represents about 3 million construction workers.
Each year, construction consistently ranks among the top industries of heat-related injuries and fatalities, which are entirely preventable.
Paparello spoke at a recent hearing about proposed federal heat protections that would require employers to offer water, shade, and breaks during hot weather. Right now, only a few states have such rules in place. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. The Katy Independent School District is giving raises to teachers. From the Fort Bend County Bureau, News 88.7's Natalie Weber says the school board voted to increase teacher pay during a meeting earlier this week.
House Bill 2 provides funding for raises for teachers with 3 or more years of experience. The Katy ISD School Board also approved a $2,500 stipend for teachers with 1 to 2 years of experience. That raise will be funded by the school district, not the state. Superintendent Ken Gregorski spoke in favor of including entry-level teachers in the pay raises during a meeting last week.
We, collectively as the state of Texas, not we the board, are going to look at all our teachers across Texas and not allot $1, not even $1 for first and second year teachers. It was just strange to me.
The school district is currently facing a $26 million deficit for its 2025-26 budget. From the Fort Bend County Bureau, I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
Houston has a trash problem. It has a lot less trucks than Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio. That's because it spends considerably less than those cities. Why?
Houston is one of the only cities in America to not have a dedicated solid waste fee and instead, uses general revenue to pay for that. Most cities, you'll pay a special fee on your bill, generally around $36 a month is the average across America to have a dedicated fund to go towards solid waste.
Luke Metzger with Environment Texas says Houston spends $235 yearly per household. Fort Worth spends $308, Dallas $464, and Austin more than double what Houston spends at $494 per household yearly. Metzger was a guest on Houston Matters. We can expect some thunderstorms and light rain today. It's currently 78 degrees with a high near 88. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Hello Houston.
Hello, Houston.
And you'll notice in our intro it says Ernie Manouse, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Yes, well, one of these doesn't look like the two of us, right?
That's right. Ernie is out today unexpectedly, so we are hoping he's fine. Everything's okay.
Yeah, but he's out.
But he's out.
So it's you and me, kid.
It's just you and I, kid. Let's do this. Speaking of just you and I, Frank, you look really nice today.
Thank you. I have a video shoot at 1:30.
Oh, there you go. So do I.
I sprayed my hair and put on some makeup. I hadn't put on makeup in a year. Literally.
Yeah, because you're in radio now, right?
Yeah. Well, and we're on YouTube, of course.
Yes.
People can see us on our YouTube channel.
Go check us out. We look fabulous today.
Don't we? I mean, if you ever want to see us looking good, today's the day.
Today is the day. Check us out. And Ernie's not here, so it's even better. No, I'm just joking. We miss him. But yes.
It's amazing. So it's a little wet.
Yes.
It rained this morning, and then I got here to the studios just as it started raining again. It's raining right now. Mm-hmm. There's just this moisture coming off the Gulf all day, high pressure off to the east. It's causing that big heat dome. Mm-hmm. That same high pressure, it's sort of pick your poison. You want to be really hot and miserable, or you want it to rain all day?
Well,
but it's cooler.
That's, I think, my takeaway from all of it. I don't mind a shower that cools everything off.
Yeah.
But Frank, my question then becomes, does that mean that humidity rises and comes up?
Sure. Okay. Oh, yeah. It's all off the Gulf. Okay. Yeah. So, and they're hot and dry. We're humid and wet. So, cooler, and the rain cools the waters over the Gulf a bit. That's good for hurricanes. So, it's always something. It does look like it'll dry out as we go into Thursday and then Friday, Saturday, maybe a bit more wet on Sunday.
Okay. What about the heat? So it'll stay off?
The what?
The heat?
91, 92.
Okay.
So like it's been, but not the hundreds. I'll have to look to see what the hottest it's been officially so far this summer, but I don't think it hasn't been that bad.
It hasn't been that bad, and we're almost into July.
Yeah.
I can take it. I think we can, Houston, we can handle this.
Maybe a coolish or normal summer if we just keep those storms away.
Yeah. And Andrea, how is Andrea?
Andrea's dead as a door now. That didn't last long.
No, she didn't.
No. So Andrea's out of here.
But coming up on Hello Houston, we're joined by Dr. Asher Lubotzky, the Israel Institute Teaching Fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston. Dr. Lubotzky brings a deep expertise in Israeli politics, Middle Eastern affairs, and international relations. And we'll talk about all that is going on. And there's a lot.
I think we'll get a lot of questions.
Yes. So
I have a lot.
You can call us at 713-440-8870 with your questions. You can also text us If you're not in a place with your phone, you can send us an email at talk@hellohouston.org. And be sure to like and subscribe. We're also on Instagram.
Or just stare at us. That's fine.
Or you can just stare at us on YouTube.
All right. We have a lot. Speaking of policy,
yes.
Get us started on this. This is a crazy thing.
This is really
that's going
interesting,
on
Frank.
here.
I've heard you kind of talking about it this morning, and when I looked at it, this is wild. Texas is ending in-state tuition for undocumented students. The state is asking public colleges and universities to identify which of their students are living in the country illegally so they can start paying out-of-state tuition, which is now required by a court ruling earlier this month. In a letter to college presidents last week, Texas's Higher Education Coordinating Board Commissioner Wynn Roser said undocumented students who have been paying in-state tuition will need to see the tuition adjustments for the fall semester. A spokesperson for the agency said it has no plans to provide further guidance on how schools can go about identifying undocumented students. The Texas Tribune asked several schools in the state earlier this month whether they collect this information. The University of Houston system said its applicants do not have to share their immigration status. Other schools, including Texas A&M University, Lone Star College, and the University of Texas at Dallas, and UT-RGV, or UT Rio Grande Valley, did not respond to the question. Some said they're still trying to understand the ruling and what it means for their students. Now is the time. Frank and I would like to hear your thoughts on this directive for Texas. For Texas Public Education, give us a call at 713-440-8870.
I'm as confused as anyone because it says living in this country illegally, and that's really to say undocumented.
Right.
So a kid could have been here almost all their life.
Yes. So this, I believe, is specifically speaking. So back in 2001, the Texas DREAM Act went into effect where Texas universities and community college applicants who lived in the state for 3 years before graduating high school. So they have to have, I believe, an equivalent to a high school diploma, a high school degree, to be able to then, and be here 3 years prior to that. So basically, you're looking at somebody who's gone through middle school and high school.
And is a Texan.
And is a Texan.
And they're trying to say, well, no, you're not really a Texan, so we want you to pay out-of-state tuition as if you were from Birmingham, Alabama. And a lot of my friends that went to UT had to do that because they were from Birmingham, Alabama, and it's enormously expensive to go to UT if you're not from Texas.
There's such a price difference. In general, out-of-state tuition versus in-state tuition, there's a huge difference.
So is it a punishment to people who are here undocumented? That's the start. Why are we doing this?
And I think this again goes from a federal level. We have seen the Trump administration who has done a very broad stroke take on immigration, and it doesn't matter where you're at, who you're at. If you are here illegally, this administration wants you out of this country.
Well,
and he ran on that, and people voted for that.
But I don't think they understood. It's like kudzu. The tentacles go so far in so many directions, you never know how it's going to affect the people that you may know and love.
And we are seeing that there have been people that have said that there have been full towns that say that they voted for Trump supporters, and they have had some of their own people living within their towns that they've known for their entire life, living within their community, that have been deported.
Well, the universities, as you said, don't know quite how to respond because federally, I don't think you have to say whether you're documented or not when you enter a college, and in most of the state.
Right.
Yeah. So,
U of H said it is not a requirement for students to put their legal status.
And so now how are they supposed to go and find out who is and who isn't? Raise your hand if you're here undocumented so that we can double or triple your tuition.
And the logistics of this is going to be tough. And we want to hear from you. 713-440-8870. Barbara from Magnolia is on the line. Barbara, welcome to Hello Houston. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have two things. The first one is that these are kids that are working hard, studying, trying to better their lives. They're not going to qualify for any state loans or grants or anything. They have to pay their full tuition up front. And if they end up having to pay out-of-state tuition for almost all of them, it will mean that their education has come to an end. And that doesn't help them, and it doesn't help the state.
Right. You're right.
The other thing is that the reason that I have always thought that it was fair for them to pay in-state tuition is because their families are living here, they're paying taxes, they're paying property taxes, they're paying sales taxes just like everybody else. And so it's only fair for them to get the same tuition as everybody else.
Well, they're a Texas resident. Whether they're documented or undocumented, they reside in the state of Texas. That's what it says on their driver's license, I can guarantee you. It says Texas. So to say that for some reason they're originally from another country and now they're considered not a Texan is beyond the pale, in my opinion. But thank you so much, Barbara. I'm totally on your side on this. Jim from West Houston, what are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's terrible. We've come a long way in this country. I mean, the people, black people, white people, brown people, everybody has come a long way.
Gay people, don't forget us, Jim. Don't forget us.
Yes. We have an element, and they're in government now, and they control, and we have the white establishment. They do not want black people and brown people to get an education. They don't want them to be smart. And I just despise this group of people. I can't stand them, and I don't know how they get into control, and they know how to manipulate the system. They know how to draw the lines so that they will come out ahead, even though they don't have the most people supporting them. It's just exasperating.
Well, Jim, how do you think they won?
You agree with me?
I agree with you, but how did they win?
Exactly. That's how they do win. When you draw the lines around such a way that you can control, the vote.
So gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's being challenged and not very successfully. So
thank you, Jim.
I appreciate it, Jim. I don't know that Texas. I don't know that whoever wants this to happen is going to get any real result.
Well, the thing is that I think a lot of people, Jim, such as yourself, they feel very strongly. But when we're looking at what President Trump ran on his campaign, starting from the top all the way down to our local elections, people wanted more conservative policy.
I think he ran on fear. He ran on fear of your economy cratering and the borders being open and all these people rushing in. I think that's what he ran on.
And there were lots of surveys done that they looked at what Democrats wanted when it came to looking at a president, and democracy was one of the top things on the list, making sure that our Constitution was upheld. Looking at Republicans, like you said, Frank, they wanted immigration was top of the line. Security, they were looking at.
And remember, Trump cratered the immigration bill that had been was ready to go to vote and had been agreed upon.
Is that politics, right? I mean, he essentially was doing what he wanted to do, and and Congress and our elected leaders locally, from a local and a state perspective.
Well, it's good to hear from people like Barbara and Jim who are passionate about their beliefs on this, because wherever we go, I mean, the only thing, as Obama always said, don't complain, vote.
Yes,
that's
that is, I think, the lesson here is we are coming up in our elections, in the midterm elections, and go out there and vote. And again, we love hearing from you. Give us a call, 713-440. And we have a call from Representative Rick Noriega on the topic. You can join the conversation, 713-440-887. Representative Noriega, welcome to Hello Houston. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you. I'm catching kind of the tail end of your conversation, so I want to make sure whatever I contributed.
Sorry about that. I think we have a little bit of a hard time. We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Are you there, Representative?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. No, I was just saying that I hear there's a little bit of an echo also. But regarding your conversation and the Texas Dream Act, House Bill 1403, that was passed in the 76th legislature, 2001.
Which you wrote it. You wrote that bill, didn't you?
That's correct. I was the author.
Mm-hmm. So what does it mean when now the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board Commissioner, Win Rosser, wants to know which students in state are undocumented so that they can pay out-of-state tuition? What does this mean?
Well, they already have that information to some degree because those students are required by law to fill out an affidavit pertaining to their status and their commitment to legitimize their status. So they have that realistically already.
When you say they, you mean the state or the universities?
Yes, the universities.
Okay.
The universities have that information, and the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board rolls up a lot of that data to be able to determine the number of students. As an example, I believe this coming fall semester, we're talking typically about close to 20,000 students across the state of Texas, which represents about 1.5% of the total higher education population this coming school year.
So why do you think that? I mean, do they want to just identify who is here undocumented and try to get them out of here, or are they truly trying to find out who is undocumented and from a different country and trying to make them pay out-of-state tuition? What's the motive behind this?
Well, you can't speak to people's motives. All I can speak to is impact. And we know the impact on the front end. It's been an overwhelming success as a matter of public policy. I would submit it was probably one of the most impactful public policy initiatives in the higher education space over the past 24 years. 23 other states followed suit. And the end state of it has been tangible in terms of the economic impact, in terms of a whole host of other economic and social drivers. So someone's intent or motive of why they want universities now to act as quasi INS officials or whatever, I can't speak to that.
Now,
what I do know is just going to have a negative impact on our state in a lot of ways.
Now, Rick, you authored this bill in 2001, and now here we are in 2025, and essentially we're looking at the rolling back of it. What was happening in 2001 that it was able to go through, and how have you seen the political landscape here in Texas transition to now where you're talking about a bill that had major impacts, positive impacts on the state, now being rolled back essentially?
Well, it's a profound question because the same coalition that existed in 2001 that helped to create this law in Texas and to be a leader in the United States in setting this particular trend and effort among many other states. It was a coalition of business leaders, the chambers of commerce, faith-based communities, obviously the educational space of folks, on and on. And that coalition really has not dissolved up until this year. Now, there's always been challenges. And we also recognize that there's always been a small, very, very small voice and population of those that would just be always say never, or whatever their particular motive is. But what we have seen is in the public space, there's just been a growing voice of intolerance for whatever reason. And I can't speak to that. But what I do know is even in this session where there was legislation filed, both in the House and the Senate, and I give credit in large part to the Republican leadership. I mean, they recognized what was occurring, and permitted these efforts to continue to die a slow process, because the net on this policy has been a benefit to the state of Texas. I would even go so far as to say that part of Governor Rick Perry's legacy on the plus side has been standing by his guns on having signed this particular bill into law and defending it, understanding that it was really about the moral thing to do and the economic development and intellectual capacity growth right thing to do for our state. What we realized in 2001, my position was, immigration policy is not our lane in terms of the state. And immigration policy was as broke in 2001 as it is today.
Yep.
It was broke in 2006 when I got deployed as the Laredo sector commander, when then former governor and president of the United States, George W. Bush, had pushed a comprehensive immigration bill through the Congress, but it was held up because of the shout for border security, which nobody really can define what that means.
Yeah.
And I did my war college thesis on border security.
Well, we got to wrap it up there.
We'll have to have you on Hello Houston.
I know. Thank you for calling in. This was a surprise to us. Rick Noriega heard our discussion.
Former representative.
And wrote the dream bill, essentially.
Authored it, yeah.
Well, anytime that 20,000 of our Texas students, their future's on the line, I'm going to call in.
Thank you, sir. You call anytime. If you want to come in studio, just let our producers know. We'd be happy to have you.
On Hello Houston. Thanks for joining us.
Let me know how to get with you guys. I'd be happy to contribute.
Okay.
Absolutely. That was former Representative Rick Noriega, who called in to discuss what Frank and I were talking about earlier, which was the Texas is asking public colleges and universities to identify which of their students are living in the country illegally so they can start paying out-of-state tuition. Everyone is always welcome to join us right here on Hello Houston. That's what makes this show possible, is you all listening and joining us on YouTube and on air.
And now we're going to go from this state conflict to an international conflict.
That's right. Coming up on Hello Houston, Israel Institute teaching fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston, Dr. Asher Lubotzky, will break down the Israel-Iraq conflict. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
People think that in the coming weeks, we could be moving towards an endgame in Gaza, just as we've reached an endgame in Iran.
I'm Rachel Abrams. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
You can listen to The Daily. It's on tonight at 7 o'clock on News 88.7.
What you hear on this station, every report, every interview, every update, is only here because someone like you gave.
80% of Houston Public Media's funding comes from Houstonians like you. Our newsroom runs on support from you, our community.
You have the right to know what's going on, and you have the power to make sure others do too.
Join the community right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. Texas family-owned and operated since 1962, offering a large selection of wines, spirits, and beers to choose from. Details at specsonline.com. The fun starts here.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Miller Outdoor Theater, presenting Classic Albums Live, with a cut-for-cut performance of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album, Saturday, June 28th. Open to the public. More at milleroutdoortheater.com.
Support comes from Children's Museum of Houston, presenting Faithful Friends, an exhibit exploring understanding and friendship, where kids discover that while faiths and beliefs may differ, kindness and friendship are universal. More at cmhouston.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Visit Galveston, celebrating Juneteenth. As Juneteenth's birthplace, visitors can explore exhibits, tours, and events honoring the legacy of freedom all month long. More at visitgalveston.com.
Now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Celestia Sherman and Frank Billingsley.
Hello, Houston.
Hello, Houston. The Israel-Iran conflict remains one of the most complex and consequential geopolitical struggles in recent memory. Yesterday, President Trump announced a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran, aiming to bring an end to what was dubbed the 12-day war. With regional stability hanging in the balance, the stakes couldn't be higher. To help us make sense of this ever-evolving situation, we welcome Dr. Asher Lubotzky, and an Israel Institute teaching fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston. Dr. Lubotzky brings deep expertise in Israeli politics, Middle Eastern affairs, and international relations, and we're honored to have his insights today. You can join the conversation. If you have questions for Dr. Lubotzky, you can call or send us a text to 713-440-8870. Dr. Lubotzky, welcome to Hello Houston. Thanks for joining Frank and I.
Thank you for having me.
So there's been a lot of question on the status of the ceasefire. President Trump posted on Truth Social the ceasefire had gone into effect on Tuesday evening, but there are questions on when it went into effect for both countries. Can you talk to us about that? Elaborate on what is happening and what is current.
Yes, so far the ceasefire is being kept. It started in the morning, Middle Eastern time, in the morning of yesterday, Tuesday. There was probably one missile shot from Iran around 10 a.m., so about 2 or 3 hours after the ceasefire was supposed to kick in. Israel got mad about this and already thought about retaliation, sent airplanes in the air, but President Trump stopped it. That was Tuesday morning, around 10, 11 a.m. Israel time. And since then, so already over 24 hours, ceasefire is kept so far, and it looks like it's going to be kept as much as we can predict about the future.
How long do you think realistically that this ceasefire can continue?
Ceasefire what is a ceasefire too, right? We can talk about this too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because Iran works in different ways, Israel works in different ways to work against each other, right? So what we saw in the last 12 days, 2 weeks, was a direct clash between Iran and Israel, right? This is pretty rare, and this is very highly painful for both nations, for both countries, right? This is a full-scale war between two very strong militaries. This, I think, as we see now, will be maintained. The ceasefire here will be maintained, at least, probably, at least in the next few months. But the two countries also clash in other ways that are below the level of full-scale war, right? Mm-hmm. Iran employs proxies around the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Hezbollah from Lebanon is one of the most prominent ones, but also the Houthis are considered to be proxies. There are proxies in Iraq. Some people see Hamas, although it's more complicated than that. Some people see Hamas in Gaza. So Iran has other ways to act against Israel. Mm-hmm. And Iran can support or encourage those proxies to act against Israel. By the way, they didn't succeed to do that in the last war, in the last 12-day war, right? Because Hezbollah has been beaten pretty hard by Israel about a year ago. But there is this proxy war. So proxy war can continue, right? This is not included in the ceasefire deal, right? This is one thing. Another thing that is not included in the ceasefire deal is, for example, is that Israel can work in undercover or things that are below the radar without official responsibility taken against some Iranian targets. For example, we saw during the war too that Israeli intelligence services, the Mossad most importantly, right, works in Iran. We know it for the last decade and more that Israel has been doing operations covert operations in Iran against mostly against nuclear targets, nuclear scientists, and so on. So these things may also continue because it's not included in this kind of ceasefire that we're talking about.
Yeah, so some things may calm down. Do you think without a regime change, it will really ever change?
That's a great question. So I do not think it will change without a regime change. The regime in Iran is, in the end, publicly ideologically, right? It's not a realistic, opportunistic, policy. It's an ideological policy for the last 46 years, right?
And that policy is get rid of Israel.
The policy is get rid of Israel and get rid of American presence in the Middle East. They see Israel as kind of, as it is, right, a very strong ally of the United States. So this is not something that we see change in the fundamental way, right, in the ideological way, right? They may say, oh, all right, the last 2 weeks were very painful. Let's scale down what we do. Let's do it in different ways, maybe. Let's do it more covert. We need time to rebuild. We need time to restore our capabilities. So that may happen, but I don't see the Iranian regime as it is right now changing its basic ideology of getting rid of Israel and getting rid of American interest in the Middle East.
You're listening to Hello Houston, and we are talking to Dr. Asher Lubotzky, an Israel Institute teaching fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. Joining us now is a call from Jeff from Northwest Houston, who has a question for Dr. Lubotzky. Jeff, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hello, thank you. My question is, the Israeli military is highly praised. The Mossad, their secret infiltrations, the things they do, the bombs that they put in the pagers, the attack on Iran. How is it that on October 6th, they were caught so unprepared that for basically the whole day, Hamas just waltzed through the country without so much as a howdy-do? I'm just puzzled by that. It just doesn't pass the smell test for me, if you can respond.
That's a great question. We're still asking ourselves, but let's point out to something very important here. Both in Lebanon and in Iran, Israel was prepared. Israel was planning to do things for years. There were operations, there was intelligence being collected, and once you're prepared and once you decide when to start, you can get very great achievements, right? But if you don't see an entity as the main enemy, for example, Hamas, okay? If you don't see Hamas as something that is threatening you, right? For real, now, a few rockets here and there, that's what people thought, maybe a little strike in or there from Hamas against Israel. But if you don't see Hamas as a strong military entity that can actually attack you all out one day, you are not prepared for that. You don't even imagine this, okay? Just like the Americans could not imagine 9/11, right? We just couldn't imagine, couldn't see airplanes coming into the World Trade Center, right? So when you can't imagine it, it's hard for you to get prepared for it. And the Israeli intelligence and the Israeli operations, so always in the last 2 decades, I've seen Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon as the main enemies. And they got prepared, and they did a great job, as we saw, and as you mentioned, they did, in military terms, they did a good job. Hamas was seen as a movement that wants to keep quiet. They want to keep their rule over Gaza and not get into those kind of wars that the Israelis thought that Hamas knew that they're going to be defeated. So why would Hamas even start a war with us? We're so much stronger than Hamas, right? So when you cannot imagine the scenario, you can be caught unprepared.
Yeah, I was thinking that exact thing, that we really aren't in a position to make judgment on preparation in this country because we've seen it happen here. James from the Woodlands has a comment for you, sir. James, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
the way that I see a solution to this is regime change. We need to get rid of the mullahs that are there, the Islamic State. We need to get rid of that and have it go back to a secular society. I think there's overwhelming support. The true evil, the people who've caused this crisis, is the rulers, the dictators of Iran.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah, James, you're right. I think that Dr. Lubotzky absolutely agrees with you. We did refer to that. I have a question. When you were saying that, of course, Hamas and the Houthis are all going to still be there, what do you think that means to cells, or at least purported cells, here in the United States? Will they take action against Americans?
The question is, well, we assume that there are cells, right? Also from your questions, we assume that there are cells in the United States. I think that if they are, the question is, are they capable of doing anything, right? Are they in a situation, in operational situation, capability to even do something? Maybe they are just at the beginning. Maybe they didn't find the right time to attack yet. So the question is their capabilities, and another question is that a decision, right? Is there a decision to attack within the United States, right? We obviously do not know the answer. We suspect that Iran, maybe other terrorist organizations, got people into the United States. We suspect it. We see there were some arrests here and there. I mean, I do not have a definitive answer here. I assume that because of the ceasefire, Iran will not want to do something against the United States right now.
Okay,
So I would say that probably right now it's a bit safer time.
Okay, another quick question. Are there any countries in the Middle East, or which ones, that don't support the American action from last Sunday?
Okay, so now you need to differentiate between an open public endorsement and the kind of behind the scene endorsements, right? Support.
I get that.
Right? This is very important in the Middle East. Okay,
Yes.
This is a very important thing. I would say that most countries, most sovereign states in the Middle East were not too upset by Iran getting hit by both Israel and the United States. Okay, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, and we're talking about Egypt and Syria, and even Turkey. Okay, so behind the scene, there's not much love for Iran. Okay, and all their kind of involvement in other countries' affairs, right? Openly, though, publicly, because of many different considerations, some countries have to say things. It's mostly meant for their own domestic publics. And most of those countries somehow lightly or not so lightly kind of condemned the American attack, or at least, showed concern or expressed concern, right? That's publicly. But we need to always understand that there is the public thing and there is behind the scenes. And some people in the administration, the American administration, already said that a lot of those countries, the Gulf countries, actually were very happy with what the Americans were doing. And I tend to believe that it's true. And yeah, so Iran doesn't have too many friends in the Middle East, which is important to note.
Silence is golden sometimes.
We have a call from Seth from the Heights with a question for Dr. Lubotzky. Seth, welcome to Hello Houston.
Seth, are you there?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. We can hear you now, yeah.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. One comment I had first was I think it's important to recognize this talk of cells and, the Iranian government and all that. Let's please distinguish between the people and the regime. There's 1.5 or 2 million Iranians here, and all of us are feeling scared. We hate that regime as much as anyone else. We're not terrorists, and we don't want to be associated with them. We feel for our safety. There are right-wing extremists here in the U.S. making comments about how there are 2 million proxies in the United States. Not a single Iranian American has ever engaged in an act of terrorism. And if the U.S. government asked Iranian Americans to step up and help crack down on these potential terrorist cells, every one of us would volunteer to help. So that's the first part. The question I have, and I would love to get your guest point of view on it is, if Israel had the opportunity to take the snake's head off, right, to kill the supreme leader, to really target the regime, to support regime change, why wasn't that done?
It's a good question.
Dr. Lubotzky, what is your response to that question?
Right. Thank you very much. First, I totally endorse your message at the beginning. Right. There's the correspondence. Right. It's not the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic, right, of Iran, and the Iranian people are definitely not the same thing. We don't think there is too much legitimacy to this regime, especially not from Iranians in the diaspora. And as you see, some of the people that were kind of disappointed by the ceasefire, many of them were Iranians in the diaspora, right? That they actually wanted it to go all the way and end up in a regime change, right? So definitely this distinction is very important, and thank you for making it. Regarding going for all the way, so there is some kind of hesitations in America, but also in Israel, from the idea that foreign countries can just to initiate, a regime change somewhere else, right? The United States, as you all know, tried to do it, not so successfully in several places in the last 2 decades. Israel kind of tried to do it in Lebanon in the early 1980s, also wasn't very successful. So countries are kind of like, they're reluctant to go all the way because they know that, you start this and then you don't know how it ends up. Although I do believe that there's not many other scenarios that can be worse from this current regime in Iran, right? But still, you can think about the chaos that may ensue. You can think about, civil war in Iran, and then like even a more extreme things that will not hesitate to use, to go all the way for nuclear missiles, stuff like that. So I'm saying that foreign countries know that they are very limited in what they can do. So what the Israelis say, what the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and others say, is that was not part of our goals in this war, right? In this operation, the goals were not to change the regime, but if it will help the Iranian people to rise up, right, and oppose the regime and make a new revolution, that would be great. And therefore, some targets were attacked that were connected to regime stability. For example, the notorious prison in Iran, where a lot of regime oppositionists, right, are locked and tortured, was attacked by Israel. Okay. Now that's in the end, Israel is acting from the air, right? Yeah. From the aerial space. It's very limited in actually doing things on the ground.
Okay, we have to leave it there.
Dr. Lubotzky, we have lots of calls still waiting online, but unfortunately we have to wrap this segment. We will have you back on Hello Houston, and everybody can continue to email us, and we'll be sure to get those questions in. Dr. Asher Lubotzky is an Israel Institute teaching fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston. Dr. Lubotzky, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
After the break, we'll hear a conversation with Ernie and the resident alien star, Sara Tomko. Stay with us.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVIN.com. Purchasing vehicles in minutes with the VIN or license plate, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at GiveMeTheVIN.com. Support for Houston Public Media comes from Baylor College of Medicine. At the heart of the Texas Medical Center, Baylor physicians and scientists continue to shape healthcare for Houston and beyond through education, research, and innovation.
And now back to Hello Houston. To get your comment in on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celestia Sherman and Frank Billingsley.
Sara Tomko is a film, television, and theater actress, best known for playing series regular Asta 12 Trees in the sci-fi comedy series Resident Alien. She was in Houston for Comicpalooza this past weekend, where she appeared alongside her Resident Alien co-stars Alan Tudyk, Alice Wonderland, and Corey Reynolds. Hello Houston's Ernie Manouse spoke with Sara recently ahead of her Comicpalooza appearance last weekend, and here is that conversation.
It's a fun show. It defies explanation because it is funny, but it's serious, it's mysterious, and so I'm curious, as a performer, being in that world, there are things your character doesn't know, but there are things Sara knows as the actor, knowing the property you're working on, knowing from ahead. How do you play so you don't overplay things that are hints to the audience that maybe they need to pay attention to, but you don't want to overplay it? Where's that balance? How do you work that?
That's a great question. One of my favorite things to do is when I get the script, we usually get together and do like a table read. And then I get rid of everything in the script that has nothing to do with me, because I like to watch the show like everyone else as a fan. For example, in season 3 for our big finale, I completely forgot like who finds out what and how they have these, these cliffhangers for their characters. And I was just as floored as everybody else. I have too much going on with my character. I just need to focus on that. So I think in terms of your question, the easiest way for me to take away the Sara and just bring in the Asta is to be totally, honestly, authentically in the world that I'm in when I'm shooting, and to really not know the information until it's given to me.
Yeah.
And it's, sure, I know a lot of things about my own character, but again, I like to just kind of get rid of everybody else's story so I don't know. That helps. But I also just think there's something really powerful and playful, like clown work. There's a purity there of really in the moment finding something out, and there's a pinch in the ouch of that hitting you and having to explore that reaction. And it's one of my favorite parts of acting.
Because it's comical, but also serious in moments, how do you find how to present the character? What's too broad and what's too drawn back in a show like this, which I think would be a very challenging balance act to find?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I mean, it is a very tender balance between comedy and drama. I think in season 1, it was a lot darker, and they started to really lean more towards the comedy in season 2 and 3. But I think my role as Asta is to come in and be just truthful and the straight man, really. I don't have to do as much comedy as my my cohorts. So I get to just come and listen and react and just be honest to my own self and to my own story. And it leaves room for there to be just truth in both comedy and drama. It's funny because it's true. It's sad because it's true. And I think that's why it's so relatable to so many people, because there's something for everyone. And it's not just slapstick comedy. There also is really heartfelt, meaningful moments in the show that Asta really is at the forefront of, and I'm so grateful for that, because that's really my bread and butter.
Yeah.
I'm not the comedian.
How did you come to be in this? And what did you know of Resident Alien when you first were either auditioning or told of this part?
I was given the cover of the Resident Alien graphic novel, the comic book, written by Peter Hogan. And I saw the picture of Asta and Harry on the cover. And I remember thinking, she looks like me, like really, like the nose and the eyes. I don't know. There was something about the way she was drawn that I felt very, drawn to. And I just thought, well, this is really cool to be going out for something that's already out there, but is going to be interpreted in a new, fresh way on TV. And when I read the script, it was one of the scenes from the pilot episode, and she was full of anger and resentment. And at that time in my life, so was I. I had a lot going on in my personal life, so I really understood her. And I really didn't have to put too much on it. And it was a wonderful audition, which turned into a booking. But as you know, with pilots, you never know if the show's going to get picked up. So, I was just grateful to go from waitressing to being a series regular for 2 seconds to going back to waitressing for a whole year before we actually got picked up for season 1. By the time I got to play Asta in full, I had lived such a full year of excitement and fear and doubt that I was able to just jump right into where she was at in her world and really just, I don't know, sign right up and get right to it.
Somewhere I saw you said advice to people who want to get in this business or are in the business and trying to make a go of it. You said, get a day job you really enjoy. So while you're following this, and you mentioned waitressing, and you really enjoyed being a waitress.
Yeah, I think the career is the jobs that you that support you while you're auditioning. That's the career. And then if those jobs become acting jobs, well, yay, that worked out. But the career is mind, body, spirit, staying aligned with yourself and with your true reality and having a bunch of really great auditions. And you just, honestly, it's a win when you go into the casting room and have a good audition. If you book the job, it's a bonus. There's so much that goes into the acting world that there really isn't acting left over until you finally just get to say action and go. The rest of the time, there's so many business aspects, so much doubt and fear about what you're doing and, if you're doing enough. And so I think it's so important that also you have something to monetarily support you on the side, because acting isn't always going to be a monetary successful adventure. It's definitely going to leave you like the hustler that you are. All actors are hustlers. We got to do what we got to do to make money. So if you can find something that makes you happy, that fulfills you, that is flexible with your schedule so you can continue auditioning, that is where your career is going to thrive. Because if you're not worrying about booking a job for money, then you can book a job for soul. And that's really where I think the best bookings come from.
Yeah. Talking about hustling, is it true, not hustling necessarily, but kind of forcing your family to be in plays that you were creating as a child?
It's funny. I never forced them to be involved, but I did make them watch me. I forced them to be the audience. My brothers and I have great relationships, but when we were younger, I really wanted to play sports, and they were older and, they wanted to just play with the boys. So I would play with them by playing around them. I was the coach and the fans and the popcorn man. I remember going to my brother's football game, and there was one of those coolers that had the cool, square 3D print at the top. And I would pretend I was a secretary of a CEO. I mean, I was constantly in imaginary circumstance. But my brothers were also, as they got older, they were into theater. We all were singers. So I was just reviewing a home video recently where we did a play for my parents' 25th anniversary. We wrote a skit and pretended to be my parents in a car trip. So there was a lot of creativity in my family, but it was never forced. It was always just, that's the way it is with the Tomkos.
Yeah. When you go to these cons and you get these opportunities to see fans, what surprises you about either what they ask or how they relate to what your work has been?
My favorite part about meeting fans is them being completely honest with why they're watching the show and how it affects them, mostly in a meaningful way. I've had a lot of people tell me, it was the one show I was watching when my mom had cancer, and it was the one thing that kept her laughing. Or a fan that will say, I was really down and out, and it was the only thing I felt like putting on my TV. That interaction is so meaningful to me, especially since I was in the worst place in my life when I did this audition, and it ended up being the best thing that had ever happened to me. So I can really relate to people watching television and feeling like they're your friends and feeling like they're not alone. Honestly, it's been one of the biggest goals in my career is to reach you through your living room and make you feel seen and heard. And so when I get that feedback from audiences that say, I do feel seen and heard, especially by your character, it means the world to me. So fan interaction is what it's all about.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of these cons? Does it take up a good deal of time?
I'm just starting out. Alan is the big ticket seller, as you know. He's so popular and so talented, especially in the sci-fi world. So he's got a lot of fans. But as the show is growing, we about 2 years ago started getting conventions that were reaching out saying, we'd like to have more of you at these conventions. And frankly, I didn't really know anything about them. I knew of them, but I thought it was something you did when you've had more success or down the line. I mean, I've gotten a chance to meet some of the people from Lord of the Rings and Star Trek. And so I was just sort of like, I'm around these people that I'm a little bit geeky about. This is so fun. But now it's fun to see that there are people that are geeky about me. And it's just this wonderful, like circular, like joy fest that these cons have been. So this is probably maybe my 4th or 5th convention. And I'm still a little baby, learning the steps and like learning the ins and outs. My favorite thing is when fans tell me about like, the different things that they wear or the stickers they give or the gifts they give out to each other. And it's just so fun to learn each con's like through line of gifts and toys and fun.
I've done some little voiceover work for anime, and I've always joked, I just want one character that connects, that in the rest of my life I can go to cons and sit there and sign autographs and meet the fans.
Honestly, it still could happen because voiceover is such a wonderful world where you can still be found that way. And I've seen a lot of voiceover artists at these conventions that have long lines of people who are really like, love their voice, love their work. So, hey, it could happen.
Sara Tomko, thank you so much. And Resident Alien, let's hope for a 5th season. That's what, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Film, television, and theater actress Sara Tomko spoke with Ernie Manouse. You can find the whole interview on our YouTube page at YouTube/Houston Public Media. Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll continue diving into the top stories of the day. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manouse, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from attorney mediator Ron Bankston, providing in-person, video conferencing, and hybrid mediation and arbitration services. More information is available at ronbankston.com.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we continue diving into today's top stories, including NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte praising President Trump as a man of strength and a man of peace at the 2025 NATO summit. What do you think? I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. We'll also speak with Adrian Rocha, the Director of Policy at the Last Prisoner Project, who will break down their fight to end the criminalization of cannabis.
Plus, we'll also speak with Nancy Almodovar, founder and CEO of Nan & Company Properties, a leader in Houston luxury's real estate market, who joins us to speculate exactly where future NBA Hall of Famer and new Houston Rockets Kevin Durant will live.
And we want to hear from you, so give us a call or text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to HoustonPublicMedia.org and click the big orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
It's 12:03. Our weather forecast for the rest of the afternoon: showers and thunderstorms likely, and then late this afternoon we may see some sunshine after it moves on out. It's 77, your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12:04.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Civil liberties groups plan to challenge a Texas law Governor Greg Abbott just signed that will require the display of the 10 Commandments in all public school classrooms. News 88.7's government reporter Andrew Schneider says these are some of the same groups that just notched up a win against Louisiana's 10 Commandments law in a federal appeals court last week.
Abbott signed Senate Bill 10 into law Saturday, one day after a three-judge panel of the U.S. Fifth Circuit ruled Louisiana's law unconstitutional. Rachel Lazar, who heads Americans United for Separation of Church and State, says both the Louisiana and Texas laws fly in the face of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment.
There are limits on the free exercise of religion. In other words, the government cannot favor one set of religious views over any others or religion over non-religion.
Lazar says her group and others are also considering suing Texas over another new law, which would let school districts set aside time for students and faculty to pray or read religious scripture. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
The NBA draft is tonight, and News 88.7's Rob Salinas reports the Rockets are throwing a party even though they won't add any new players to their roster.
Let's go Rockets! The draft is a time to celebrate. Every year, the Rockets host a party for fans to show up, cheer on the new players, and celebrate the team's legacy. This year, one element of that will be missing after the team traded for Kevin Durant.
You're headed to Houston.
In order to get Durant, the Rockets sent both of their picks in tonight's draft to the Phoenix Suns. That won't stop the party at the Toyota Center, which promises to have plenty of events for fans to participate. I'm Rob Salinas, News 88.7.
We can expect some light rain today. It's currently 77 degrees with a high near 88. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Think or Swim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us this Wednesday, June 25th, in our second hour of Hello Houston.
With two people.
With just the two of us.
Ernie's out. Today, we got a nice YouTube comment.
Oh, yeah? What is it?
From Gerald Thurman, a songwriter. With you guys, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. It's still excellent. Best morning show in Houston.
Oh.
Love the commuter cut.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And yes, for those of you that don't know, we do have a commuter cut of our show. Our show is usually from 11 to 1, but you can catch the 40-minute commuter cut. Because that's how long it takes
to get home in traffic when you're commuting.
That's right.
That's terrible, but that's the average.
That really.
Yes.
And they
for me, it's 20 minutes, but some poor guy out there, it's 60. So
I
40
know. You know, for me, it's usually, if there's zero traffic, it's about 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
With traffic, it takes me 30 minutes.
It can take 30, yeah. It depends.
This morning, there was a ton of traffic, and all I could think about was our segment yesterday with road rage. Get out
of my way.
I was like, okay, Celeste, bring it down. Do your breathing exercises. But you can join us on YouTube and see Frank and I doing our breathing exercises.
See Frank and me.
Frank and me. Okay, so full disclosure, I do speak Spanish and English.
You're going to hang your hat on the English is my second language.
Not my second language. I learned them together. Okay. Frank and
my bilateral language.
Frank and I is also correct.
Yeah, Frank and I are going to the movies. I'm going to the movies. Frank's going to the movies.
Thank you for joining Frank and me.
Well, that gets a little tricky.
Okay.
Well, Frank, thank you for joining Frank. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for joining.
So
Frank
use the object of the sentence. Thank you. For is a preposition. So now you use an object of the preposition.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
I've got to tell you, every time I say it, I will at least get I'm not even joking, 3 emails about my grammar.
My uncle was gay, and his partner for 40 years was an English professor. He was head of the English department at Memphis State. And and I asked him the same question. And he said, the English say it is I. The French say c'est moi. It is me. So, pick your poison there. If you want to feel French, say, it is me. If you want to feel proper in English, say, it is I.
There you go.
But when you use those prepositions, for me, with me, about me, make sure it's a me. You don't want to say, and I always hear between you and I.
Between
it's
you
totally
and I.
Incorrect. Even songs that have been written.
Between you and me.
It's between you and me. Between is a preposition.
Even off air, Frank has corrected me. He's like, Celeste.
You know what? I vowed when I was 50 I would stop doing that because
I
nobody
like
likes a smart aleck weatherman.
No. You're not a smart aleck weatherman at all.
Are you with I on that? Are you with I?
Are you with me? Between you and me, Frank, we have had a hoppin' first hour.
Yeah, the world's in a place, isn't it?
I was actually just thinking about that. I was talking to Dan last night about how I feel like there are so many things happening in this moment on so many different levels, right? We're looking from the geopolitical standpoint. We look at the federal, just our nation, what's happening. We look from a state level. We just got out of our 89th Texas legislature session. And then locally, right here, our city, we're talking to our mayor about deficits and HISD.
And these school vouchers have to be figured out.
And
then there are going to be elections coming up that are going to be important.
Is it right? Does every generation feel that?
Probably. I remember when 9/11 happened. We were speaking about that earlier. And I called my dad. Of course, everyone called somebody they loved. And I just felt like we were destroyed. He said, I've been around a while, and I've seen World War II, and I've seen Vietnam, and I've seen protests. I've seen a lot in my life, and this is horrible. But we will adjust and we will move on, and we'll never forget. But we will learn how to keep going as a people. And he was right. I mean, we still remember, of course. But it's these times that we live in are. May you live in interesting times.
You're living in interesting times. But, Frank, hearing that perspective from your father, who's obviously a different generation, giving you that kind of foresight brings me comfort because I think there are a lot of very young people, and we are seeing this even with the way younger couples are wanting to bring children into this world. They're not sure. They're like, this is kind of crazy times.
Cher said it best. If it's not important in a year, it's not important.
Well, there's a lot happening, and it is going to be important in a year. Earlier we were talking about Texas ending in-state tuition for undocumented students. We actually had the former representative Nick Noriega calling in to discuss the bill that he authored back in 2001.
And he has a lot of insight. That whole bill was to give people opportunity and education and treat people like people.
Yes.
And this new directive is like, wait. You're not a Texan if you weren't, really documented here. You need to be paying out-of-state tuition, even though you've never lived out of state, and probably most of your life you haven't even lived out of Texas. Even if you're originally from another place. And that seems patently short-sighted.
Absolutely. And we're going to try to have him on Hello Houston as well. Earlier we were talking about what's happening, the latest in Iran-Israel conflict. And so we love to hear from you. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
And speaking of fairness, we're going to talk later in this hour to the Director of Policy at the Last Prisoner Project, Adrian Rocha. They're a national nonprofit group that's fighting to end the criminalization of cannabis. And, of course, that's
we were talking about that yesterday.
Even the governor and the lieutenant governor can't agree on cannabis and hemp. So it'll be an interesting conversation.
That's right. Moving on to our topics for the day. President Donald Trump was hailed at the 2025 NATO summit after the U.S. struck Iran's nuclear facilities over the weekend. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte praised Trump as a man of strength and a man of peace. Rutte also praised Trump's effort to get NATO members to pay more and said the president was flying into another big success after all countries, except Spain, agreed to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. Leaders of NATO member states had mixed reactions to the strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, with several calling for de-escalation while acknowledging the threat a nuclear Iran would pose to global security. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is holding news conferences with other leaders at the NATO summit in the Netherlands. Iran's damage assessment. In remarks to reporters earlier today, Trump downplayed an intelligence assessment that said the U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities set that country's nuclear program back by only 3 to 6 months. It has been a couple of days since the bombing. Do you believe in the actions of the president? Is he a man of peace, or was the military strike unnecessary? Now is your time to chime in. Give us a call, 713-440-8870. Frank and me would love to hear from you.
No, Frank and I would like to hear from you. I would like to hear from you. Frank would like to hear from you. I know. You have two languages going through your head at the same time. This is a really interesting approach. I mean, on the outset, growing up, America was always kind of the world police, and then we sort of stepped back from that. And I think Trump is saying the sheriff is back, and I'm going to do what I think I should do to bring at least some semblance of peace to the world. I'm disappointed that he seems to be taking his eye off of the Ukraine war. And in fact, I think Ukraine has rescinded the Peace Prize nomination to Trump because of that, the Nobel Peace Prize. I think we got to get back to looking at the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, this one, and it's interesting, you said the intelligence report saying that we only set Iran back 3 to 6 months. That comes from the CIA. That comes from our own people within the CIA. The years and years that we set them back comes from Israel, one of their intelligence divisions, without any proof, So I'm not sure we know the answer to that, and I'm not sure it matters. What I think matters is that we took an action. We didn't just talk about it and say, come to the table, come to the table. We said, you know what? You need to come to the table now, and we're going to make
or else.
you.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, you said how America has kind of been this police of this geopolitical landscape for a very long time. And there are some internal conflict happening within the Republican Party where President Trump has been a very America first type president.
Right.
We aren't going to be policing everybody else. We are going to be looking at things that we are going to take care of ourselves first, but
we're a great friend to Israel.
This is conflicting. Some would say this is a little bit of a conflict here, and we want to hear what you have to say. Give us a call, 713-440-8870. Colby from Katy on this topic. Colby, welcome to Hello Houston.
Colby, are you there?
Yes.
Speak up a little bit.
What are your thoughts on this, Colby?
Well, I think that this Iran situation could have gone a lot worse, and I'm grateful that so far it hasn't gone as bad as it could have.
Agreed.
But I also think that it may have been unnecessary. I have my doubts about the intel regarding Iran's nuclear development, and I also think that this may have been a distraction from some of our more domestic issues.
Like take your eye off of the economy or take your eye off of whatever, right? And don't look too hard at yourself if you're looking across the pond.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So I know, right now, a lot of people are upset about how ICE is handling immigration.
Yeah, good point. The quote unquote protests versus riots, that whole issue. You're absolutely right.
Yes. So by creating this international event and creating tensions that way, we lose focus on what's happening in downtown and major cities, and we start thinking about national safety.
And some say that this could be essentially a strategy by the president to, as Colby was just saying, thank you, Colby, for joining Hello Houston, that this is a distraction. I mean, this is a pretty big one. But we also have a call from Sean from Memorial City. Sean, welcome to Hello Houston. What are your thoughts or questions?
Yes, hello. I listened to part of the conversation that pretty much Trump is wanting to portray the sheriff is back in town and America stepped back from the role of policing the world, but now is back to do that. And my comment was, seeing what's happening in Israel and the war with Gaza, it looks like we need someone to police us and not the other way around.
Well, you may be right. That was our take in the 80s and 90s. Is America poked its nose into everything. Ronald Reagan.
Well, I think the question is why is the president choosing to poke his nose in this and not essentially what is happening in other areas? Such as Gaza?
Because we need Israel. I mean, it's important to have a friend with that kind of intelligence to know what is going on in the Middle East. I mean, we need Israel. And he knows that, and that's why he's a good friend of Israel. And 12 days into that war, or about 10, he said, "Okay, I'm gonna help."
Right. And Sean, thank you for giving us a call. We did get a text that says, "Are you kidding? Trump was going to end Russia versus Ukraine and Israel versus Gaza long ago, not at us against Iran." Yes, wag the dog. That was a text. We also did get a YouTube comment that says, "Why does he have to be so disrespectful to people? And he's always blowing his own trumpet." Pun most definitely intended. "I wish he was more professional. It's embarrassing. An ounce of respect doesn't cost a penny. How's that for a good deal?"
That's so true.
There have been questions. What is the strategy behind poking our heads into Iran versus Israel? And there is Russia versus Ukraine, Israel versus Gaza. Again, you can join the conversation at 713-440-8870.
And we may come back to this. Shall we move on to our next topic?
We shall.
This is really interesting. A theft suspect.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. He's hospitalized after being accused of fleeing from police in the Galleria Mall on Sunday. At about 2:20 p.m., investigators said officers were alerted about a theft. Officers attempted to detain the man, but he fled on foot. Officials said the suspect injured himself after jumping from the mall's second floor into the ice rink to evade police. This is so John Wilkes Booth, isn't it?
This is so Houston. I'm sorry. He jumped off. There's video. The video is
From
wild.
Channel 13, they had it showing the moments that the man was lying on the ice, the suspect taken to the hospital. I guess he's okay, but charges are pending against him. What would you do? Well, first of all, if you saw somebody jumping onto the ice.
That would be really scary. I'd be really scared. But he also, he clearly hurt himself. It's very evident.
He probably broke his leg.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. The video is, if you have a queasy stomach, I don't recommend you looking at it because you can definitely tell he's broken something. But you know what? I kind of chuckled, and it's not funny, but is it bad that it's kind of karma? You steal something. I believe that he had some other law enforcement issues there at the Galleria, and he's like on his phone waiting for somebody to come help.
Oh, Lord. To try. Oh, he can't. He probably broke his leg so he couldn't, or his ankle or something.
No. He could not move.
He couldn't move.
And so he's on the...
Because that's got to be 40 feet. No, that's got to be 30 to 40 feet.
Oh, yeah.
From the second floor to the ice
Oh, my
rink.
gosh. What would you do in that situation? Get caught or take the leap? And what is the craziest thing you've seen at the Galleria? Oh, my gosh, right? That is so funny. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Here's the craziest thing I've seen.
Yeah?
A big truck, and I admire people who have these big trucks, although I would never fit with one.
Does it incite your road rage?
No. I mean... I like my Range Rover, right? Okay, so this big truck is in the parking lot, in the garage, and now it's stuck because it's so big, and it can't move. So, what would you do if you're stuck?
Well, you do the Austin Powers ding.
No, he got out and he let the air out of his tires so that he would bring it down about an inch, and then he could roll back.
Oh,
so that was kind of brilliant.
That is. So he's done this before.
I guess it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. I was
Clearly,
like, oh my goodness.
He has done this before. But again, we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
And our thoughts and prayers to Iceman.
Oh my gosh. You know what's funny? Yes, it goes out to him. Whenever I give out the phone number, I always worry I'm going to give out my own phone number. So 713-440-8870. But coming up on Hello Houston, we'll talk with Director of Policy at the Last Prisoner Project, Adrian Rocha. They are a national nonprofit fighting to end the criminalization of cannabis. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
It can be hard to stay informed about what's happening in our city, our state, and across the country. That's why Houston Public Media makes it easier.
Everything you hear on News 88.7 is powered by you, not advertisers. 80% of our funding comes from our Houston community.
That's what makes public media different. It's community funded and always here for you when you need it.
Join that community now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Matters highlights the people, places, issues, and ideas that define Greater Houston. And we do it live on the air weekday mornings at 9 on News 88.7. But we know you're not always available then to listen. So subscribe to our podcast wherever you get yours, or find each day's program to stream online at your leisure at houstonpublicmedia.org. And reach out with questions or comments anytime. Email us at talk@houstonmatters.org.
This week on This American Life, we visit a hospital in Africa, complete with beautiful operating rooms and flying drones that carry snakebite antivenom that treated a big chunk of its country's people for absolutely free. In February, their funding was shut down when the Trump administration closed USAID. And now the people running this hospital are pondering what was good and what was bad about what they built here.
You can hear This American Life. It's on tonight at 9 p.m.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Luke's Health and the St. Luke's Foundation, supporting clinical excellence, compassionate care, and a healthier future for all. More at supportstlukes.org.
Support comes from the Eternal Gandhi Museum, celebrating International Day of Yoga with an open house, yoga for all skill levels, cultural performances, and more. Open to the public, June 21st. Registration at egmh.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Celestia Sherman and Frank Billingsley.
All right, Governor Abbott has vetoed Senate Bill 3. That bill would have outlawed the hemp industry here in Texas. He's now called for a special session to revisit and tweak that legislation. So how might this bill be adjusted during the special session? We'll wait and see, and what it's going to mean to the state hemp industry. Joining us is Adrian Rocha, Director of Policy at the Last Prisoner Project. This is a national nonprofit fighting to end the criminalization of cannabis and cannabis enforcement that is still fueling the prison pipeline. Adrian, welcome to Hello Houston. I can't hear you, but we're going to fix that.
I think you might be muted.
You might be muted.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
you're okay now.
Oh,
I can hear
there
you.
we go.
I heard the uh-oh, so we're good to
There we
go.
go.
We're good to go.
Afternoon, y'all.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Hello Houston, Adrian. So, Adrian, when we're looking at this, the policy at the Last Prisoner Project, when we're looking at criminalization of cannabis and cannabis enforcement, we often think about size and how much is on a person if they get stopped. Elaborate on what the rules and regulations and laws are around that.
Yes, absolutely. So I think what we're outlining there is worst case scenario. So an individual stopped, there is some sort of substance that the arresting officer believes is an illegal substance, cannabis in this issue, and then they're booked, they go to court. So I think when we're outlining that situation, we're assuming that that individual goes to court and they're found guilty, and then there's a penalty imposed. That's true for most individuals. But what is also true is that at individual, let's say they get to court and that charge is dropped, you now have a criminal record that follows you for the rest of your life. And in Texas, to expunge that criminal record, it's called an order of non-disclosure. And it's actually a very difficult process that involves lots of petitions. You have to hire an attorney because this is a legal procedure, and lots of fines. So what you could have is an individual who may not have been guilty of the underlying offense and now has the life-altering collateral consequences of a criminal record that will follow them for the rest of their lives.
And could also meet them at the border if they leave this country and try to re-enter and don't have full citizenship, but they have this marijuana conviction. That's what's getting a lot of people deported.
Absolutely. And I live in El Paso, so this comes up all the time, right? You have Border Patrol checkpoints leaving and coming into El Paso. Between 2002 and 2020, there were 47,000 deportations based on marijuana use or possession alone. And in the state of Texas, we saw 25,000 arrests in 2023 simply for marijuana possession. So these are life-altering consequences for individuals that can impede so many different portions of their life and may actually end up in their deportation from this country.
So what part of this are you trying to fix? and how do you want to fix that?
Yep. So our main goal here is that legalization alone is not enough. We really want to see retroactive relief when states legalize. So the idea that as a state legalizes cannabis, there's also proponents or provisions built into that bill that actually undo the consequences of prohibition. The thing that we really wanted to highlight in SB3, and I want to give flowers where they're due, I think a lot of credit has been given and a lot of impact was made by the small business community here in Texas. We have one of the largest hemp economies in the country. It employs tens of thousands of people in retail, manufacturing, and farming. But what was really missing from that conversation is SB3 could have made it way more dangerous to possess federally legal hemp than illegal marijuana. And I'll just articulate a few of those reasons. So under SB3, it would have been possible to be charged with a third-degree felony for manufacturing, delivering, or possessing a consumable hemp product. But under the state's current marijuana law, possession of 5 pounds of cannabis isn't even a third-degree felony at that point. So you had this really strange structure where it might have actually been more beneficial for individuals to argue that they had federally illegal cannabis than federally legal hemp because of the provisions that SB3 would have imposed for criminal penalties for individuals.
So when you're talking about this, though, what about those people that say, if you start allowing or you legalize small amounts, it's just going to allow people to carry larger amounts and more serious type substance?
Yep. So the good news on this is that we have 24 states that have adult legalized markets all across the country. We have one that borders me right to my left, about 20 minutes away in New Mexico, and actually a pretty robust medical license operation in Oklahoma just to our north. The data does not bore that out. I do think there are significant and legitimate risks about these products hitting the market. Labeling is very important so that individuals understand the dosage per unit. But these arguments that this is a slippery slope often is not proven out in the data that has been shown across the state. So you can look at a state as old as Colorado, one of the first states to legalize cannabis for adult use. That has not borne out. You can look at states more recently like Missouri, very conservative, just like Texas, and that has also not been borne out. What is true, though, is that prohibition is not an effective regulation. Time and time again, we've seen that prohibition does not erase the constituency or the demand for these products. It's quite simple, right? If you abolish the Houston Texans, it's not like everybody's just going to be like, okay, we're cheering for the Cowboys now, right? That constituency remains. So it really should be about what Governor Patrick said Lieutenant Governor Patrick said he is, which is how do we create the regulations to ensure that these products are safe and accessible and make sure that they have the intended effect.
So help me a little bit with the terms, because when we say cannabis, we're
saying cannabis and hemp
and the marijuana. So what's what? I mean, I know what it smells like. That's about all I know.
And then there's like Mary Jane, and then there's like all kinds of
stuff.
There's all kinds of stuff.
It's a great question. So without getting into the hard science of it, because I am definitely not a scientist, there is a distinction. All this comes from the distinction that was made in the 2018 Farm Bill, which basically said anything under 0.03 that is considered hemp and anything above that is called intoxicating cannabis, and that is federally illegal and a Schedule I drug.
But is it the same plant? Is it the same plant, just a different amount of THC in it?
That is correct. So these are all derived from the cannabis plant. And really, the distinction exists in law, but not in science, right? You can have a black and white regulation that exists on paper, but actually determining the difference in the synthesized cannabinoids, all that sort of stuff, that's hard chemistry. And I think that's one of the things that we really wanted to consider when you're creating laws that are based on whether or not this is a product that's hemp or a product that's cannabis. Who's going to make that determination? The courts across Texas are already strapped for cash. And then we're going to ask them to invite chemists into courtrooms to determine, was this actually hemp at the time of possession, in which case they're subject to a different penalty, or was this cannabis at the time of the possession, and that's subject to a whole different schema of penalties. So it really is causing this confusion. We really thought that you could just sort of draw a line and say everything from this point on is hemp and everything from this point on is cannabis. And that distinction in practice actually ends up being difficult to enforce.
So cannabis is marijuana, the one we're all kind of used to hearing about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Cannabis, marijuana,
and hemp has less THC.
Flower.
Right. So do you grow it to have less THC, or do you take the weed and do something with it? I'm learning so much about marijuana now.
Yep. So in both procedures, you would have to extrapolate some of the sativa from the plant in order to make it intoxicating. The difference with intoxicating hemps is that you're talking about biosynthetically organized molecules. And so this is a whole different type of plant. And so, I think there are legitimate consumer safety concerns about this, but outright banning it, as this bill would have done, SB3, that's not regulation, right? That's obliteration. And that's just simply not a way to regulate these products. The need for these products exists. We heard multiple veteran groups come forward during the legislative process to say there are significant therapeutic benefits from PTSD to individuals who served in military, and they should have access to these products. And what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and the Texas legislature asked and passed was not a regulation bill. It was a full ban on these products, ensuring that any individual who wanted to access these would not be able to do so in a legal manner.
We are listening to Hello Houston, and we are speaking to Adrian Rocha, the Director of Policy at the Last Prisoner Project. You can join the conversation if you have any questions for Adrian at 713-440-8870. So Governor Abbott vetoed Senate Bill 3. You've said this is a win in some ways. How does this affect the Last Prisoner Project?
Yep, and I think it affects all of us, and that is to say, this distinction exists because cannabis is still federally illegal. And to the questions earlier, right, like what is the distinction between cannabis and hemp? Well, that distinction is only because it exists in one federal law. And we can see that change if we just legalize cannabis. This distinction between intoxicating consumable hemp products and cannabis wouldn't exist if we just got rid of the federal ban on cannabis. 24 states have already done it for adult use, and over 40 have done it for medical and therapeutic reasons. And so I think one of the best ways that we can approach regulation is the same for a lot of industries: transparency and sunshine, right? If you let us in, allow this to be a legally consumable product, we can really have thorough regulations that are consistent across the states to ensure consumer safety.
So I always think the answer to everything is money, right? I mean, that's always seems to be the answer.
Really, Frank?
And this is a huge billion-dollar business. And if we have 40 states that are using it medically and 25 for recreational use, it must be because there's money in it, right? Those states see dollar signs. So why is Texas are all our dollar signs about oil? I mean, can't we look at this as not only a compassionate
as an economic opportunity,
as well as compassionate?
Absolutely. So I think there's two ways to think about the money question here. There's exactly what you're outlining, which is how much money are we leaving on the table by not taxing these products and regulating them. Colorado's school system improved drastically after legalizing cannabis because they earmarked certain portions of those sales and retail taxes to go directly to the school system. And as a result, Colorado's school system is now one of the best in the nation. Now, it's not a one-to-one comparison, obviously. There's a lot of different things that go into that, but having money is a great first start. The other thing to think about, too, is how much money are we spending on incarcerating individuals who have nonviolent offenses? You think about all of the money that's going into the court proceedings, the individuals who no longer can get jobs because they can't pass background checks. That's all a drain on our economy as well. And so what we're really seeing is a whole sort of system of impediments to individuals being able to move on with their life because they possessed cannabis. And this is an offense that is deemed so low that even at the federal level, even though the penalty exists, the U.S. Sentencing Commission has said nobody is continually charged with simple possession at the federal level anymore, because there really just isn't a return on public safety dollars on that. And so I think the question we should really be asking ourselves is, what are we really doing here? Are we mad at these people, or are we afraid of these people? Because if we're mad at them, we're spending a lot of money on a finger wag.
Well, I think that's why the governor said this is going to be in court for years, because at the federal level, it is just a slap on the wrist.
Yes, but I think that there is a culture type of, besides the economics behind it, as a parent, as somebody who looks at this and does worry about my children taking substances or this type of thing getting into the wrong hands, I understand looking at this from prison reform and incarceration and what that does on somebody. However, from a culture perspective, I have seen people that wear shirts that say, "Don't California my Texas." So I think there's going to be, besides the economic benefits, what are the downfalls of it if a child is using this, or, parents are concerned about this, just the way you don't want your child drinking alcohol. I wouldn't want this to get into my
But your children still do.
No, absolutely not. My children are perfect. Adrian, what do you have to say to that about people that are critical of this and say absolutely not? In Texas, we will never legalize marijuana. It is a drug.
Absolutely. So regardless of whether or not we want to call it illegal or not, it's here. And I think one of the things to understand about this is because it is federally illegal, because it is a Schedule I substance, there have not been the sort of massive studies that we'd like to see to actually determine what are the detriments of using this substance. You know, we get squeaks and squabbles every now and then on studies, but because of this federal prohibition on studying cannabis and its potential benefits as well as its detriments, we don't actually know the difficulty of regulating these, especially for minors. Now, there is general science that says, you know, access to any sort of mind-altering substance, be it cannabis, be it alcohol, before the age of 22, when the brain is still developing, is a detrimental outcome for individuals and may have long-lasting effects. But regulation, prohibition is different from regulation. We haven't seen prohibition work for high schoolers before. I was a high schooler myself. I can tell you that alcohol was readily available at that point. And
hello, senior prom.
Yeah. Tell your mom.
Exactly.
I mean, I've heard of.
We have to ask ourselves, how do we actually determine the system that's best to ensure the thing that we want, which is safety. And right now, obliteration just isn't the answer for that at this point.
Well, from the doctors we've had on Hello Houston, vaping is far more serious an issue than a gummy is. This, you know, putting this stuff in your lungs that way. So the bail reform and the numbers, you really have them at your fingertips, which is clear. So let me ask you, how many millions, if not billions of dollars does Texas spend incarcerating people before their trial by not just letting them agree to come back and actually putting them in jail over marijuana before they're tried for it?
That's a great question. So the standard estimate is at about $4,500 per individual to keep them at a county jail. So you think of that number of, again, 25,000 arrests in 2023. Not the best person at math, but that's not a drop in the bucket, right? And you're talking about counties oftentimes who are responsible for keeping those people in jail before they go to trial. A lot of counties don't have lots of budgets, right? We have a ton of small counties. Again, I live in El Paso, right? So I'm surrounded by small counties that don't necessarily have the budget to continue to incarcerate these individuals as we're waiting trial. And that would have actually gotten even worse under SB 3 had it gone into law, because then you have to factor in, like, now we have to run a bunch of tests to determine whether or not the penalty's for hemp or whether or not it's for cannabis. And the way that they tried to save this in the bill is to basically say, when we can't determine if it's hemp or cannabis, you can just get charged with both. So what we could have seen is, because a drug test can't really distinguish it, we could have seen people just get stacked with more time because they couldn't make that distinguishment at the trial. And so you see a double or sort of bloating or ballooning of the criminal penalties for what is essentially the same plan.
Well, we did get a comment from Mary from Spring saying, without arresting people regularly for small amount of drugs, the prisons would be far emptier. In the protocols, it says that slavery is illegal in the state of Texas, except for inmates.
That was Mary from Spring. You can join the conversation if you have a question or a comment at 713-440-8870. We also did an email on this topic that says, hello, love your show. Thank you. My personal opinion on this topic is that TCH hemp marijuana should have been decriminalized state/federal decades ago. It has been scientifically/medically proven that alcohol and nicotine legal drugs are infinitely more harmful, addictive than cannabis. As your guest just said, the only explanation for not decriminalization is to keep the prison industry, state and privatized, going, particularly against all people that are not white. And let us not forget the huge alcohol and nicotine lobbies. Just my thoughts, Jerry Ann Constantino.
I have a feeling our guests would agree with all of that.
Yeah, I think that, right, we can look at this from an economic standpoint. We can look at this from a, compassionate. But I do think that you start to get into dangerous waters when you're looking at, mind-altering substances without just legalizing it.
But 40 states have.
Right, and you look at those states and you see what... It would be interesting to look and see what type of comparisons we have.
Well, have you done that?
So there's some great science and comparison on states, especially post-legalization, pre-legalization, and then to additional markets. A lot of these come from Washington, since Washington was one of those first mover states, legalized adult use cannabis recreationally long before a lot of other states, and then was surrounded by states who hadn't done it, for example, Idaho. What that data bore out was there was no significant increase in crashes. There was no significant increase in emergency visits by youth at that specific time. So that's a big concern, obviously, going into it, is cannabis-induced psychosis for individuals who are under the age of 21 and vibing. And I think that makes a ton of sense if you think about it practically, right? If you are in an industry trying to make money, it is not in your best interest to have your product end up in the hands of an individual who may threaten your bottom line. And that's fundamentally what good regulation looks like, regardless of whether or not it's cannabis. It's ensuring that there are safety protocols so that if there is a bad actor, there are penalties for that. But by and far, for individuals who are using the substance appropriately and responsibly, they have an opportunity to access a product that is safe.
Well, I do want to get quickly to what the Bail Project does, which is provide bail and for people that can't afford it. I mean, you're there to help those who are low income. But I do notice that you've left the state of Texas. Is that right?
So I'm actually back in El Paso at this point. I was in Louisiana, so our neighbor to our east over there, and I'm back in Texas. And that is a component of what we do. So we do provide direct representation to individuals who are facing cannabis charges. We have many constituents. A lot of them are from Texas. But we also do systemic reform as well. So we try and institute policies that as cannabis is legalized or decriminalized, individuals have an opportunity to have that criminal record cleared free of charge and automatically done by the state, and also have an opportunity to be resentenced so that any time that they served or are currently serving for cannabis falls off their sentence.
So how does somebody
how does
somebody get in touch with your company or your
nonprofit?
Not a company. It's a nonprofit. Yeah. How do you get in touch?
lastprisonerproject.org. Please feel free to send us an email. My email is adrian@lastprisonerproject.org. I'm always happy to connect with people so we can figure out how we can move closer to the last prisoner for this substance.
Okay. Adrian Rocha is the Director of Policy at the Last Prisoner Project. Adrian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
So we already did receive an email about grammar.
Oh, how's grammar? How's grammar and grandpa?
Let's look at grammar question that drives me crazy. Omitting the preposition after the verb graduate. What happened to the preposition from? I will graduate from high school, not I will graduate high school. He graduated high school. It drives me crazy. I hear newscasters, journalists, television folks, even friends of mine that are speaking like this. It is wrong, wrong, wrong. It is no different than the problems people have using a subject pronoun versus object of the preposition. Your thoughts? Marcia Wolf. Well, Marcia, you want to hear my thoughts? No.
What are your thoughts? I hate the word mischievous. I love the word, but it's not a word.
Okay.
It's mischievous.
Mischievous.
But for some reason we say mischievous. Because it sounds devious.
But that actually is pretty spot on. You know, it's interesting.
You know what the most commonly mispronounced word is?
Ooh, I'm trying to think. I don't have anything.
Often. The T is not pronounced.
Often.
It is O-F-N. Often. No, it's not often. It's often. And there's no second. Sometimes there's a second, like you could do it either way. Nope, often.
English is tough, y'all.
Y'all.
English
that's
is
my
tough,
favorite
y'all.
word.
There you go. We're from Texas. I've got to tease Dan. Dan says vegan instead of vegan. He says vegan.
That's like the Gulf of Mexico.
He's from Katy. All right. After the break, we discuss where NBA superstar and future Rocket Kevin Durant might live when he moves to the Bayou City. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Adams, the new general manager of Houston Public Media, and we are here for one reason, you. I'm thrilled to lead this remarkable team dedicated to our mission of informing, educating, and inspiring everyone in the greater Houston area. And yes, these are challenging times, but together we'll meet them head on with bold ideas, honest reporting, and stories that matter. Houston Public Media is your public media. Together, let's make it incredible.
It's one thing to love public radio, but is a special thing to support it. Consider this. If you've got a car you don't need anymore, or you've got one that's simply too expensive to repair, you can arrange to donate it to Houston Public Media. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition. It's easy for you, pickup is free, and it could be worth hundreds of dollars in support. Visit HoustonPublicMedia.org/cars to learn more. And thanks.
They've never served in the military. They don't strictly work in defense, but they're now lieutenant colonels in the U.S. Army Reserves, tasked with making the armed forces, quote, leaner, smarter, and more lethal. 4 tech executives from companies like Meta and OpenAI are the Army Executive Innovation Corps' newest officers. What you need to know about this new initiative, that's next time on 1A.
You can hear 1A coming up this afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Hey, it's Michael Barbaro, host of The Daily. Join us here on Houston Public Media every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. The Daily focuses on just 1 or 2 stories each day, offering listeners a 30-minute deep dive portrait of the characters and human stakes driving the news. That's The Daily from the New York Times, weeknights at 7 on News 88.7.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply.
Support comes from Galveston Historical Foundation, celebrating Juneteenth. As Juneteenth's birthplace, visitors can explore exhibits, tours, and events honoring the legacy of freedom all month long. More at galvestonhistory.org/Juneteenth 2025.
Hi, it's Jeremy Hobson, inviting you to join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. here on News 88.7 for The Middle. This weekly live national call-in talk show amplifies the voices of people in the middle, politically, geographically, or philosophically. The Middle is a nonpartisan and non-judgmental space where everyone can feel comfortable sharing their views and being part of the conversation. So join me for The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on News 88.7.
Travel is one of life's great rewards, and there's always something new to see and experience when you travel the world like I do. Hi, I'm Rick Steves. Join me as we get better acquainted with the world each week on Travel with Rick Steves. Together, we'll explore fascinating sights, discover amazing food, and make new friends from near and far. Your radio is the only passport you'll need. Join us for Travel with Rick Steves.
Saturdays at 6 a.m. on News 88.7.
And now back to Hello Houston. To get your comment in on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celeste Diaz-Sherman and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back to Hello Houston. We've had a packed 2-hour show, and we've been talking about many different things, but one of the things we were speaking of right now was grammar. And I'd like to blame my parents on my grammar because they made me speak Spanish at home, and they also, both of them are very fluent in both languages.
So are you.
And they were but it has to be proper.
Well,
and it's not that proper now that I'm learning this.
Is your Spanish proper? Like, radio Spanish is very proper.
Claro que sí. Francisco.
Claro.
No me vengas. Anyway, it's official. NBA superstar Kevin Durant, one of the world's greatest basketball players, is coming to Houston to play for the Rockets, and he's a former Longhorn. This is exciting news, has left many wondering, where will the Rockets' new power forward be living while he plays in the Bayou City? Well, we have someone with us who has helped a handful of professional athletes with a Houston move, including former Houston Astros player Yuli Gurriel. Joining us now is Nancy Almodovar, founder and CEO of Nan & Company Properties, record-breaking leader in Houston's luxury real estate market. Nancy, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Hola, bienvenidos.
Bienvenida.
Okay,
now that we're talking Spanish.
Spanish.
You're
Let's
the,
do it.
Yes.
I know, you're the Nan of Nan. You're
I'm
the Nan?
the Nan.
That's awesome.
Nancy of Nan.
I did not realize that. I see Nan and properties all over Galveston.
Yes.
You're very big there in Galveston.
Thank you.
Which has been a hard market to get into because
It has.
It was a very if you weren't born and bred in Galveston, nobody would show your property.
Speaking of very big, what is kind of the hot spot right now when it comes to luxury homeownership? We all know, River Oaks, yada yada yada. But what are some of the hot spots that people might not know of?
Well, actually, there's also Sugarland. Right?
Ooh,
right
see?
now,
Fort Bend County.
Yes, we are actually representing a buyer and a seller, and they are both looking at $5 million plus in Sugarland.
Well, you go down Sweetwater Boulevard, and you are bigger than River Oaks.
Absolutely.
Those homes are huge. What's the average price of those homes?
I mean, it all depends, but one just closed for $10 million.
Oh my
Those
gosh.
homes are 20,000 square feet. I mean, they're pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Why Sugarland? So when you had these people, was it the house or was it the community?
So for this particular buyer that we're representing, she is an attorney and her practice is there. She's also a Latina, Bianca de la Chica. She wouldn't mind me sharing. And she was like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
I love Sugarland and I just have to have this certain home. And it was just in that price point.
They do a pretty good job with flood mitigation, I will say, down there with a lot of the retention ponds and the dam for the river, for the Brazos River. I was saying earlier, the answer is always money. I always hear that Fort Bend County has a lower tax base than Harris County. And so a lot of athletes sort of gravitate to that. Is that true still?
Honestly, with athletes, we've represented a lot of different athletes. Some I can name and some I cannot for obvious reasons.
Sure.
But it all depends on their needs. I mean, we've had some that, want 3-4 acres, right? So then something like out in Sugarland or out past Cypress works for them, where they can't find that in River Oaks unless they want to spend $20 million.
So is it still a lower tax base in Fort Bend County than Harris County? It is. So there's a little bit. Although they don't care about money.
Yeah,
they make so much of it.
When we're moving into the city, what are some of the other areas that you are seeing professional athletes or just professionals in general gravitating towards?
Definitely River Oaks. We've sold a lot of homes in River Oaks. We just closed $23 million in just May.
$23 million.
River Oaks. That's just 2 homes. It was the number 1 and the number 2 most expensive homes.
Okay, so I heard this and I've always wondered if this is true. So you know how you'll have home openings or walkthroughs? What are those called?
Open house.
An open house.
Yes.
So when you're looking at an open house for a $23 million home, do you have to put a deposit down to go see it?
It all depends.
Yes, I've heard people putting deposits down.
It all depends. It all depends on the seller. So every home, because it's so expensive and of that caliber, it depends on the seller. I've had sellers that, want proof of funds, depending on who they are. If they're athletes, if they're political figures, or if they're very just private entrepreneurs, they'll say, I want proof of funds and I want to know exactly who they are and who will attend to the showings.
Well, they want to make sure that it'll
security.
close.
Yeah, there's also a security element. Absolutely.
Yes, that they can afford it, but also security for
sure.
Well,
I think Matthew Perry, who passed from Friends, he admitted he would go to these open houses and rummage through the bathrooms looking for drugs, for Xanax and Valium.
Oh, my God. You're giving me nightmares.
He said that. I mean, he was very open about that. That's how addicted he was. And everybody was like, oh, Matthew Perry's interested in your house. No, he's interested in your Valium.
So any house that we represent, I accompany with an assistant or someone on my team to make sure that doesn't happen.
And that's fairly
because
common.
We do have crazy situations.
Yeah, that is fairly common with
so
high-end
Nancy,
houses.
Kevin Durant gives you a call. He hears Hello Houston, and he's like, okay, Nancy, where are you taking me? Where are we going?
So Kevin,
to look at houses.
Okay, so Kevin Durant, and this is just my thinking, he is single from what I understand and has no children.
Okay.
So I would definitely suggest a condo. I hear he's very private and low key. So a condo would be what I would recommend to him.
Didn't Biggio just sell his?
Did who?
Craig Biggio. I think he sold his condo.
I don't know.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
So why a condo for somebody that's perhaps more private versus a gated area?
a gated neighborhood. I could see where he would want something smaller. I was looking at previous homes that he's also had in different cities. And just from watching that, you know, a lot of them come here and they decide to lease at first for 2 months so they can kind of get familiar. Because the minute they move here, they go to practice. Like it's go time. I don't think they have a chance to kind of take it all in. So a lot of them do decide to lease.
Well, I would think a
first.
lock and leave lifestyle, especially for an athlete with no family.
Right.
I mean, you just want to be able to shut that door and go play in Phoenix again or Seattle.
Yeah, and Nancy, now that
wherever you're
we're
headed to.
looking at luxury high rises, where are some of the high rises going up in our area?
So there's a few that we have in the city. We're not quite the condo city, but there is a lot of options, a lot of new construction. And you mentioned Galveston earlier. We have our first condo building that we are actually representing in Galveston. It's the first condo
Tiara?
in 15 years.
Wow.
Is that Tiara?
Yes.
And you're representing that?
We are.
Congratulations.
So
Good for you.
why all of a sudden now has Galveston getting this really high, after 15 years not having a high rise?
So our developer that has that building, he goes to Miami a lot. And he wanted to bring the Miami feeling to Houston. And this building will be out of this world. I mean, you're talking wine lockers, concierge, umbrellas, chairs. You pick up the phone. I mean, all of the bells and whistles.
If I'm not mistaken, they start at $1.5 million.
You are very correct.
Yeah.
You've been looking at them. Do I
have
want
a
to show
feeling
you one?
Frank has some interesting home
I'm a Galveston
news.
guy. I'll always be a Galveston guy.
Nancy Almodovar is the founder and CEO of Nan & Company Properties. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us
Congratulations
today
on your
Hello
success.
Houston.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for listening and joining and commenting today on Hello Houston. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize